A lot of bassists know modes, but when they try and use them, they really struggle to make them sound like good music. In my 16 years of professional bass teaching, this is a problem I've seen come up over and over again. But there's one technique you can learn that will turn modes from lifeless music theory into great musical bass playing. And once it clicks into place, modes not only become 10 times easier to use, you'll sound 10 times better using them too. So in this video, I'll show you what this simple shift is, how you can use that shift to make modes sound really musical in your playing. But in order for you to use this technique, you first need to understand why the traditional way of learning modes leaves so many bass players feeling stuck, even after years of practice. Imagine going to a shoe store that only sells size 10 running shoes. Doesn't matter if you want size 8 dress shoes or size 13 walking boots. If you're not going to order size 10 running shoes, you're stuck. Now, this is obviously ridiculous, but this is exactly what traditional modes teaching does to bass players. It's one size fits all music theory that isn't really designed for how we play. So now I'll explain exactly what this problem is so you can avoid falling into this trap. Most of us will get taught modes by learning to match them to the relevant chords. So, for example, play Dorian over a minor 7 chord or play Lydian over a major 7 chord. Now, theoretically, this isn't wrong and it does work, but it works best if you're a piano player, for example, that plays loads of solos, or a saxophonist that plays loads of melodies and loads of top lines. They regularly get the chance to play their instrument over the top of other chords. But on bass, we're usually holding down root notes, so we're playing under them. Whereas top line players can often build tension in a melody by playing discordant notes that pull away from the harmony, we as bass players often have to ground that same harmony by playing root notes. Top line players can often use a lot of syncopations and complicated rhythms to make their melodies or their solos more interesting, but for us as bass players, we have to lock in with drums and provide more regular and steady rhythms. Top line players can float through chord changes or even ignore chord changes entirely to create musical effects. But as bass players, we're the first voice within the music to commit to each chord. We shape how the harmony is perceived. So if we go with a flashy modal lick instead of just playing a root note, we could ruin the chord progression, or even worse, ruin the song by overplaying. The problem is that this traditional chord scale approach to using modes can make us view bass playing as if it's exactly the same as playing top line melodies, when in reality, it simply is not. All too often, we try to use modes with this one-size-fits-all approach, and as bass players, that makes us just overplay, come out with lines that sound too mechanical, or it forces us to stop being a bass player that simply serves the song. This is why so many bass players get stuck with modes, even after years of practice, and they never learn how to use them. But there is a better way to approach modes, one that actually works for bass players. And once you see it, modes not only become easier to use, you'll also sound 10 times better using them too. But before I can show you how to use this new approach, I first need to tell you what it is. When you're cooking a meal and you want something to taste more like chili, what do? You don't just pick up an entire fat chili and throw it right in the dish every single time. Instead, you reach for your spice rack, you get a pinch of chili flakes, and more often than not, that does the job. You still get the flavor, but you're not overpowering the dish. This is how bassists should think about modes, because you don't need the entire scale, just the right part of it. But which part should you choose? Modes are often described as musical flavors, and if that's true, then each individual note is like a grain of spice. But not all notes are as spicy as others. Some notes are key to making the sound of a particular mode, and these notes are what we call character notes. They're the notes that give each mode its unique sonic identity. For example, Lydian mode is the only mode to have a major third, a major seventh, and a sharp 11 all at the same time. It's what makes it sound so bright and open and airy, whereas Phrygian mode is the only mode to have a minor third, a flat 9, and a flat 13 all at the same time. It's what makes it sound so dark and tense and quite discordant. Every mode has its own unique set of character notes, and when you focus on using those rather than just running the entire scale, you get all the musical flavor without risking overplaying. So if you want to use modes musically as a bass player, start with character notes. This is the shift you need to make. But hang on, there's a problem with this. We are bass players. aren't we supposed to play the root note the whole time? And wouldn't using character notes instead of root notes just create another problem? One where we're not properly outlining the chord and serving the song. Aren't we just replacing one problem with another here? This is a fair question, because what we need is a way to do both. A way to play both root notes and character notes at the same time while still only playing one note in total. And this is where things get really interesting, because one bassist found the perfect way to do exactly that. So now let's look at how he did it and how you can too. Now, before we start, I beg you, please don't get hung up on the genre of the song we're about to study. This isn't about our personal preferences or whether or not you like the song. This is about us becoming better musical thinkers by studying how a great player has applied music theory in a really musical way. So with that in mind, the song we're about to study is Waking Up in Vegas by Katy Perry. So the bass line we're going to look at was played by the song's producer, Greg Wells. And there's something that Greg plays in the song's final chorus that is the perfect example of how to apply modes subtly, tastefully, and in a real world context. So the song's in F major, and the chords to the chorus of the song go from F major down to C major, down to B flat major, and then back up to C major. And for the first three choruses of the song, Greg just plays the root notes, he locks in with the drums, he just follows the rhythm of the chords, no flashy fills, just good, solid, foundational bass playing. So now let's look at the fill that he plays and how he brings out this great modal sound without overplaying or ruining the song. This melodic fill happens in the final chorus, right as it transitions to the outro. Greg knows the harmony is headed towards B flat, which is the 4 chord in the key of F major. And when you're moving towards the 4 chord, the mode that fits over it is the Lydian mode. So instead of just hitting the B flat root, Greg leads into it with a short melodic fill. He plays F over the F major chord, then E and D over the C major chord, and finally plays a B flat over the B flat chord. But here's the magic. Because the phrase resolves into B flat, you hear the E and the D as the sharp 11th and 3rd of a B flat chord. In other words, the character notes that give the Lydian mode its sound. Greg is thinking more about creating a modal sound across a short span of time and using these modal target notes to transition between different chords. F over the F chord is just a root note, so that works well as the start of our line. The E over the C chord does sound like a first inversion, and it does destabilize that C chord, but it's still well within the harmony of C major. And because he's playing this fill so late on in the song, having already established that that C is a C chord, it's well within the ear of the listener by that point. So the E and the D across the C chord come across as a fill, an elaboration of C, because it's already well established. But then hitting the D and resolving that into the B flat chord by playing a root note B flat confirms B flat as the target tonality of that line. And this works because he's not just thinking about which notes go over which chord, but rather because he's thinking about what chord he's playing these modal notes into. He's using these Lydian character notes to anticipate the sound of the 4 chord before it even arrives. So even though he's only playing a few simple notes, it still brings out this whole modal quality and it fits the song really perfectly. It's subtle, it's melodic, it doesn't ruin the track, and this is how you can use modes in your regular everyday bass playing and sound 10 times better doing it. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, this sounds great, but I can't even get to the end of the song because my hands keep cramping up and giving out. It's one thing to know how to play a great fill at the end of a song, but it's another to actually get to the end of the song to be able to play it. Now, if you have this problem, don't worry, because I've made a video that shows you one trick you can use that unlocks massive playing stamina, and most bass players don't actually learn this until they pick up an injury and it's far too late. So if you have this problem, click up here to watch that video next.